Hey everyone, it is December 18, 2014. I'm Rene Ritchie, and right now we're going to go through the best Mac stuff of the year, and we're going to do our iOS 8 and iPhone 6 Plus reviews 3 months later. This is the iMore Show. Joining me today, all the way from, well, eastern U.S., Boston, the greater Boston area, someplace in Massachusetts, Serenity Caldwell. How are you, Ren?
Hi, Renee. I'm doing great. I am, in fact, in New England.
New England.
A fancy title.
What was Old England broken? Is that why you had to move? Was it?
That's why we moved across the lake, the ocean. Yeah.
The ocean. I saw that movie. There was like a wormhole, and it managed to transport you all the way across to a new civilization.
It was pretty cool.
Yeah, great soundtrack. Also joining us from roughly the same vicinity, though I believe he's been caped and caughted, it is Mr. Peter Cohen. How are you, Peter?
Good, yes. New and improved England.
So you were saying that you have no snow. So your Christmas is a paved wonderland?
Yes, indeed. You know, one of the unfortunate things that living on the Cape as I do is that we often get milder weather patterns than the rest of the state. So when the rest of the state is shrouded in snow, we are still having our bare lawns, which is just fine by me because I don't like to shovel.
Get off my bare lawn, kids.
Get off my bare lawn, kids. Exactly.
Yeah, but there's no snow inland either. So we're all just
it's just dry right now.
And coming all the way from Virginia Beach, Kentucky, Missouri, somewhere, we have Ali Kazmucha. How are you, Ali?
I'm good. We don't have any snow either.
Ali, you spent most of Tuesday trying to tell me how big the Great Lakes were and how her Great Lake was the biggest of all. Did that work out well? Did we ever solve that, Ali? Do you have the biggest Great Lake?
I think like Michigan is. I looked it up and then I had ADD and didn't finish reading, but
it's Lake Superior isn't, and it's misnamed. I demand you change the name of your lake to Gigantor.
Yeah, it was something crazy like Lake Michigan has over 3,200 miles of beach, like
you
coast.
could put Old England in the Great Lakes.
You could.
Yeah. Make it closer for you to visit.
Mm-hmm. Well,
all right. Go ahead. You can say it.
I was going to say, well, it's like 2 minutes, so I don't know how much closer it would be.
All right, so last week we went over the iOS award winners, but we did not dare go anywhere near the Mac without Peter Cohen being here.
Well, thank you very much for that. I appreciate it.
So, Peter, when last we left, like we said, I went through all the award winners for iOS, but now we're getting to Mac of the Year, and much to Georgia's chagrin, who joined us last week in your absence, it was not the Haswell MacBook Air that won, but the Retina 5K iMac.
Yeah, I mean, the Haswell MacBook Air was a pretty mild refresh for 2014, but the Retina 5K iMac was far and away, I think, the showcase Mac of the year. It's such an amazing piece of engineering that Apple has managed here. You know, it's the same form factor, it's the same 27-inch size that the iMac has been for a while, but that 5K display makes all the difference. I think you said it best, Renee, when you said that it looks like you can just fall right into it.
I have never wanted to be a cartoon more than when I look at that display, you know, and just jump in there and hang out with Roger Rabbit and my friends.
You know, and 5K means that you can edit in full 4K if you're a video or movie producer or editor or whatever, or you're doing special effects and still have room left over for your tools palette and other stuff on the screen. So it really is an amazing thing to behold. And a brilliant piece of engineering, too, because left to their own devices, the normal buses and interfaces that the Mac use aren't high bandwidth enough to accommodate a 5K signal. Apple had to do some rejiggering of things to get this to work at all. So it's just an amazing piece of work.
Yeah, and it also beat out the newly refreshed Mac Mini, Ren, which is fabulous, but it was sort of a diagonal move, not a forward move.
Yeah, the Mac Mini, I mean, that was a move that was long anticipated and very, very happy that it happened, but sadly not enough new and exciting bits to it to really make it worthwhile.
Yeah, so my biggest disappointment about the Retina 5K iMac has nothing to do with Apple and everything to do with Amazon, because they announced their 4K service and it will not run on the iMac. It will only run on certain TVs using certain boxes. So I believe roughly 3 people in the United States of America will be able to use it.
Oh, Amazon.
Boo hiss.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, I don't think that 4K is something that really is consumer ready right now for a lot of things. Amazon notwithstanding, and Netflix's rumblings in 4K notwithstanding, this is really a feature or a function that professionals who are working in creative fields are starting to use more and more, and are becoming more accustomed to. And we'll see it filter down, to the consumer level over time until it's ubiquitous, obviously. But for right now, I think that this is squarely a feature that's aimed at pro users more than anything.
So, Ali, theoretically, I could watch Harry Potter in 4K in a window on my iMac. Does that make you want to upgrade?
Yes and no.
Is that a definitive yes and no?
I'm not convinced Harry Potter's available in 4K. So I'm going to need you to prove that to me first.
All right, fair enough.
Layers upon layers.
Yes.
Mac feature of the year. Serenity, you were disappointed this didn't win for iOS, but it did win for OS X. Continuity.
Yes. Well, I do honestly feel like continuity is stronger on the Mac than it is on iOS, which seems silly to say because obviously they're designed. But the times that I find myself most using continuity are an iOS to Mac transfer rather than a Mac to iOS. And in addition to that, you really are kind of getting the missing piece to connect the Mac with some programs that you can't quite use iCloud syncing. You can, for mail as a great example of we can sync our drafts. But you have to wait, a couple minutes, a couple seconds, depending on how fast iCloud syncing is. You may get multiple copies of that draft because of sync errors. Whereas with continuity, it's just like typing a draft, swipe, okay, hey, it's there. Awesome.
I think that's absolutely true. I think for handoff, Ali, we're still lagging behind. Like, we're still waiting on apps to make the service really useful.
Yeah, there's not a ton available. Now, there's a couple that have done really awesome things like Pixelmator, and some stock apps like the Mail app. Anyone who uses the stock Mail app on Yosemite,
Keynote is great.
Yeah, and some apps are really great, and I just haven't found a wealth of apps that I use on a regular basis that are supporting handoff. And I think that's really kind of the drawback right now, is until developers kind of jump on board with that and start doing cool things with it, we won't really see a lot of that. But I think that's kind of what's making 2015 a year to look forward to, because it'll be interesting to see what they do with that.
So for me, and I don't know if you think differently, Peter, but for me, it just makes the Mac so convenient. I go to a coffee shop, instant hotspot. I want to move a picture, I take it with my iPhone to my Mac, and I'm not on Wi-Fi, so I can't do the magical iCloud photo library thing. I can just AirDrop it. It's just made my ability to move between both of them so quick and easy.
Indeed. When it works, it's fantastic. When it doesn't, it's really irritating. Ali and I think, both complained about this in our iOS 8 review, which we'll get to in a little bit. But I have the same kind of problems on my Mac, and in some cases there are issues that a couple months later I still have not been able to get ironed out to my satisfaction. Having said that, absolute game changer, especially when you start doing stuff like SMS and MMS messages from your Mac to your phone, to other people, so you can talk to your green bubble friends, as Craig Federighi called
Phil
them.
Nickinson in my case.
Right, exactly. Our friends at Android Central, anybody who's not using iMessage, basically. It turns out the one continuity feature that I use more than anything else, which really kind of surprises me, but it is true, is the ability to make phone calls from my Mac. I make calls from my Mac to my iPhone almost all the time now, probably 6 or 7 times a day when I have to call around to make appointments, or find out when my mechanic's available, or whatever it is that I'm doing, talking to family and friends who prefer phone calls to messages or to email. I end up using that feature a lot, and when it works, it is absolutely fantastic.
I think that's very true. And I think hopefully this is something that is just the beginning of a brand new technology for us. I want to get into one of the higher themes that we had this year a little bit, because it'll explain a lot of the apps. And we discussed this before the awards. But a lot of the stuff we picked for iOS was fairly new, but a lot of the stuff that we had to pick from for the Mac were ports from iOS. I mean, yes, games were ported from PC, but in terms of apps, this was the year of iOS ports, Ren, and I don't know if I'm happy about that. If I'm a little bit saddened by it as someone who loves Mac software, I don't know where to fall on this.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that if a game is a good game, we see so many titles being ported to all kind. Any console game is automatically ported to most of the major titles, or most of the major systems. Like you have got the Xbox, you've got the PlayStation, you've got all of those. So I don't think it's necessarily strange to see them make the move to the Mac, especially because some people still prefer playing on their Macs versus playing on their iOS devices. I will say in general, like it is a little bit odd to me that we don't see solely Mac only game titles, or game titles originate on the Mac and then make the jump to iOS or PC. I think really we're seeing, we see the PC game makers with the translation over to Mac, and we see the iOS game makers with the translation over to Mac, but there's nothing really that the Mac platform itself has that specifically seems to appeal to people to develop solely, Mac first. It's either iOS first or PC first, and that ends up with the Mac App Store getting a lot of ports. I don't necessarily know how we can fix that, or if it even needs fixing. If it's just something that's going to happen.
So I've gotten used to it for iOS, but the thing I've gotten used to it for games, but this year, I mean, we'll talk about it in a few minutes, Notability, CalcBot, rumors of Vesper, rumors of Overcast, a lot of apps that, not just games, but this year, it's a lot of the apps that are coming from iOS too. Peter, is that just a reflection of the market?
I think it's really interesting because it's something that I expected when the Mac store, the Mac App Store first came online, because it makes it very easy. Apple makes it very easy for developers who are familiar with Xcode and developing for iOS to cross-compile their stuff and retest it and republish it with relatively little difficulty on the Mac. So we see that a lot in games. We see it a lot in other applications. And, people have complicated workflows. They have workflows that demand the use of both mobile devices and desktop computers or laptops. So it makes sense for these companies to hedge their bets and offer their products wherever they can, for whatever platform people want to use. In the case of Mac utility software and application software that originated on iOS, the question isn't so much, are you going to do a Mac version, but how are you going to make the Mac version different than the iOS version? Because obviously a straight port, an interface that's heavily optimized for touch is not something that makes for a good experience on a Mac laptop or a desktop machine. So the developers have to be thoughtful about it. They have to be creative in how they're going to do things like data syncing. And it takes a little bit of thought. So I haven't seen, especially in the application sphere, too many slapdash ports that just smack of somebody trying to, score a few extra bucks on the Mac side. Typically, by the time they get to the Mac, they're pretty well thought out, and they've got an idea of how they're going to differentiate the product and make it really useful for a Mac user who already is using their iOS product as well.
It's interesting because Windows 10's big thing, Windows 9 started it, so Windows 10's big thing is develop for both, and their problem is the opposite. They have so many Windows developers, but very few Windows Phone developers. Where here, I remember, Lauren Brichter made Twee, so he could bring Tweety to the Mac, and the Icon Factory made Chameleon, so they could more easily bring back the stuff that they did for Twitter, for Twitterific for iOS to the Mac. But Apple, they've got the same tools, but you still have AppKit on the Mac and UIKit on the phone, and continuity is done the same way on both, but the underpinnings are a little bit different. It'll be interesting to see how that changes, and that brings me to our app of the year, Ali, and this is something that you've talked about before on iOS, and it is now on the Mac, and that's Notability.
Yeah. I've been a big fan of Notability, simply because I think it's really, it seems to me like it's more geared towards students or anyone that needs to add media to their notes, and I think that's what it's really good at. For straight text notes, I still prefer Evernote, but I I like Notability for the standpoint of media, and that seems to be what I open whenever I open a Mac or an iOS device. I don't necessarily, I have never really used Notability on the Mac though, so I don't know if anyone else can weigh in on that experience. I've only strictly used it for iOS.
I can't weigh in because I actually don't use all that many note programs on either Mac or iOS, but I do find it really interesting that, there is a drive and a desire to have really good multimedia note-taking experiences, that people are more and more using that to organize their life online. And I think Evernote's a really good example of that, as well as Notability. It's just, I have yet to crack that nut. Like, I see lots of people using it to plan and I'm still like using my scrap sheets and BB Edit and various random programs. So I don't know. I think it's interesting.
Okay, so I can certainly speak to that. I've used Notability on the Mac, and my experience has been that if you already use Notability on iOS, you're not going to have any trouble with the transition over to the Mac. And then it even works for people who might use a pen stylus. Like if you've got a Wacom tablet hooked up to your Mac or some other equivalent product, it can work really, really well if you're doing writing and drawing and that sort of stuff. It also integrates really well with cloud-based file sharing services. So if you use Dropbox, Googlebox, I think even WebDAV servers are supported. So if you've got some custom home-rolled corporate solution that you're using, as long as it supports WebDAV, you should be all set. Very powerful app. But I always got the sense, using Notability, that it was really geared towards somebody who already knew how to get the most of the program in iOS and wanted to have that experience on the Mac, as opposed to being a Mac-first product. And that right there, Rene, is sort of the danger that we're talking about when we talk about products that are backfilled from other platforms, is making sure that they have that really unique Mac experience that makes some apps stand out more than others. Having said that, Notability is such a fantastic app. It just absolutely made sense to give it a Best of 2014 award, I think.
Here's my, I was heartened because we started planning this a month ago, and I was heartened when I think Apple did the same thing. It kind of made me think we were on the right page. But the way I always thought about the different Apple devices is that the iPhone is what you use when you're quickly entering or retrieving information on the go, when you have to put something in or take something out and you're walking around or otherwise busy. The Mac is the powerhouse. It's what you do to crunch things, to input tons of data, to do lots of heavy lifting. And the iPad is sort of like for aggregation reporting. You're sitting back on the sofa, you're walking around the board table, and you just have to have all the information on a big screen laid out for you so you can see what makes sense and move things around. And using that model, I can perfectly see somebody, maybe they have a Mac in the classroom, but maybe they just have an iPhone or an iPad, and they're recording their lecture, and they're taking notes, and the notes are being synced to the recording that they do in terms of timestamp, and then they go back and they're in their dorm or they're in their home, and they're listening back to it, and they're seeing their notes. I think for that it's really useful, and having it on all three platforms, like you said, makes it more powerful, but part of that power is having it on all the platforms.
Absolutely.
So the next up, and this was actually a little bit controversial. We picked CalcBot as productivity app of the year, and I got a nasty message from Paul Haddad, the maker of CalcBot, saying, "You picked me over BB Edit. You guys are morons." So I will defend myself here, Paul. I will tell you this: for these awards in general, we try to focus on indies because they're usually doing interesting stuff and they don't have massive corporations behind them. We want to help surface that work. We try to focus on things that are new, and yes, this is a port, but it's a new app for the Mac. And we try to focus on things that have radical changes that are really different, or that give people new options. And BB 11 is one of the apps that I use all the time. I use it every day. I wrote the awards in BB Edit 11, but it was full of a lot of changes, and that's why it was our runner-up. But CalcBot was a new app, and it was delightful, and it was really enjoyable to see Mark Jardine, the designer, sort of bring his sensibility, sort of reinterpret, to borrow a phrase from Peter, what it meant to have this touch-friendly calculator app suddenly put on a Mac with a keyboard and well, in my case, a trackpad, but in most people's cases, a mouse. And I thought they came up with a really interesting solution. I called it cute, and I think he threw a car at me. But
no, you know what? I really, as someone who's not a huge calculator person, writer, I was really, really impressed by CalcBot. And while I love BB Edit and I think Rich Sequel is awesome, and I think we should probably say that like Barebones isn't necessarily a big corporation either. You know, they still probably squarely fall.
No,
into the
sorry,
indie banner.
I meant that over why we picked that over like Microsoft Word 2015.
Oh yeah, for sure. But yeah, like BB Edit is a fantastic program, and it is why we highlighted it as our runner-up, because I use it all the time. But again, if we're talking about something also an app that we think has been really well done or really really improved upon in its translation to the Mac, I feel like Calquat has to take the prize.
Yeah, it's super interesting, and it brings me to the next one, which also made the jump from mobile to desktop. So many of them, and that's Shazam. I installed this, Peter, and I wasn't sure what would happen because Shazam is part of Siri now. I just hold up my phone, and Siri says, "Oh God, you're listening to Nickelback again." No, not really, Ali. Don't throw anything at me. But it does a really good job, and I wasn't sure if I need anything on the Mac. But this just runs in the background, Peter, and anytime it detects a song, it pops a little thing up saying, "Oh, by the way, I see you're listening to this. There's all this other stuff for you right here."
I love Shazam for the Mac for that exact reason. It sits there in the background and does its thing, and as it hears music, you know, through your Mac's microphone, it tells you what that music is, and will link to it on the iTunes store, and generally make itself very usable. And I'm always surprised actually. Because when I've used Shazam before, it's been, oh wow, what is this song? I don't know what it is. I better haul out my phone, launch the Shazam app, hit the button, and do it. Now I just pop open a menu on my Mac, and I can see what it's been listening to and figure out if that's the song I like. I like that process much better. I don't have to think about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm one of the people who dissented on this a little bit because I do think that Capo 3's upgrade to the Mac is the better app. But I can see where Shazam sort of fills a niche. I feel like the only time I'm ever using Shazam is on the go and not so much in my own house or at a place where my computer's around. Like I suppose. Like I installed it when it first came out because I'm like, oh, on the Mac, that's really cool, and I just haven't found myself using it at all.
Yeah, so Capo was our runner-up, and I really wanted to vote for Capo too. But I think Chris Liscio is a genius, and the way he torments Apple's Accelerate and Music Framework teams every year is just brilliant. But so the thing for me was the iOS version won the award, and I felt like that was the real big novelty from Capo this year. And Shazam moving over to the Mac and doing what it did there made me sort of take Peter's side.
No, and I do like from a new big feature that's well done on the Mac side, I definitely can see that point. From a game changer in the music space, I mean, Capo's been a game changer in the music space pretty much every year since it's been released. So I guess, yeah, from that side, it's understandable.
What else you got for us, Licio? No, just kidding. Keep doing Capo. So yeah, speaking of that, Ren, Cinemagraph Pro for our video and photo. We have the same category, luckily, because I don't know whether this is a photo or video app.
Well, actually, Ali, I'll let you speak more to Cinegraph than I can, because I haven't used it a whole bunch, but I really like what I've been. I really like that the little bit I've been toying with it.
I haven't used it.
Oh, you people are terrible. I've used it. I think it's great. So basically, you can make a cinegraph out of it. So if I have Peter and he's just sitting there, but there's all sorts of interesting things going in the background, I can mask Peter out so he's sort of the only object moving in the background is stationary. And you can do it to make these really cool, they call them cinegraphs. Sorry, not cinemagraphs. That sounds... Anyways, they call them one of those things, and it just creates this wonderful effect. It's almost, and the reason I think we're singling you out, Ali, because it almost looks like a Harry Potter photo, where it is a photo, but it's moving, and it's got life, and it's got breath, and it's got animation in it, and it's got color and vibrancy, but it's not a whole distracting movie. And it sounds weird, but when you start to play with it, it's
super cool. Yeah, I remember seeing this for the first time either Macworld last year, I want to say, Macworld Expo, and being shocked. Like, they were like, oh, yeah, this has been around for like 8 months. And I'm like, how have I not heard of this before? Because it was really cool. And they were doing live demos. And it's like, it takes 5 seconds to make this really, really nifty looking still image with moving parts to it. And it's like, yeah, we're not quite at Harry Potter level photographs yet, and we may never be, but this is pretty damn close.
And the interesting thing is that they were almost, like you said, they were almost unknown and they were really expensive and they were absolutely worth it. And I think that stopped a lot of people from finding out about them. But then Apple featured them and they cut their price enormously the week that they were featured. And then a lot of people bought it and started making more of them. It became more and more popular. And it's not down to that level, but it's still, like, I think it's hovering now around, what is it, $45 or $50 right now.
No, it's $100.
It's $100 now. Okay, yeah. So if you missed the sale, it's $100 again, but it's still well worth it, and it does go on sale occasionally.
And you know, Flixel really deserves credit for getting Yosemite Religion pretty quickly too. They really reworked the interface in version 1.5 to look more like a Yosemite app. They've got support for stuff like iCloud Drive and the ability to switch off with handoff and stuff like that. So they're one of those companies that I think really gets it.
And our runner-up here was Flare 2, which again, the Icon Factory. They did stellar work on the iPhone and the Mac this year. And it's their photo filtering thing. If you want photo filters through the tasteful design eyes of the Icon Factory, Flare 2 is really awesome. Peter, you really drove the campaign for the Mac Communications App of the Year, and I'm really happy because I was stupefied. I didn't know what to pick because like there is things like Slack, which we use, but Slack is really a web app on the Mac. It's not an ideal app yet. It's useful, but it's a web view. And there's things like Wire, but Wire is just hella annoying. Like it's so stylized, it's just so annoying. And I hadn't even thought of that. And then you brought up Keypad, and great choice.
Thank you. Keypad was known as Continuity Keypad during its extended beta program, where I guess the developers had some trouble squaring off with Apple's something to do with the Apple development process on the Mac App Store got confused or bogged down, but it's finally in the Mac App Store. It only costs $1. And here's the thing, continuity is great. And like I said, of all the continuity features I use on my Mac, the one that I use the most frequently is being able to make phone calls. And I realized that I had a problem being able to make phone calls really quickly, in that if I was trying to call somebody who wasn't in my address book, or it wasn't a number that I was reading off a web page or some other document that the Mac could recognize and contextually interpret as a phone number, I didn't have any way of dialing it unless I actually opened the FaceTime application and then input it as a phone number there. And that struck me as a little awkward and uncomfortable. Well, Keypad fixes that entirely by offering you just what it sounds like. It's a little 10-digit keypad that works as a keypad, and you can put in the phone number, and then it will automatically send it to FaceTime, and it can dial the number. And if you're on a voicemail tree or whatever, you just hit the numbers on your keyboard that correspond to whatever you're supposed to do, and it will send that out over the signal, and it's great. I use it quite frequently to call people who aren't in my address book.
Yeah, it is brilliant. And Slack, which we use every day, is our runner-up, because as much as I wish they would make a native app, it's still very good service, very useful. Utility app of the year. This is another port from iOS, but what a great app, Deliveries. If you're someone who orders stuff, you've always had it in the iPhone. They made a widget for it this year in the iPhone, but now you have it on your Mac and in your Mac Today view. And I couldn't be happier. If these awards were delivered, I would keep track of them in Deliveries.
Yeah, I gotta say, like, especially, I mean, all of us work at home. And as such, we're always constantly getting either new stuff to review, or stuff that we're sending to each other, or stuff from potential, vendors who want us to review things. Please, by the way, don't send us unsolicited stuff, because it's a little bit creepy, especially because it's our home addresses. But yeah, I really like having Deliveries around to track all of my packages, because it's very helpful, especially I don't always work from my home office. I'll go and work other places. Being able to be like, all right, this is going to be here. This is going to show up on this day. I should work from home. I shouldn't actually go out to like a cafe.
Yeah.
And it's like the easiest program ever to use. I love that it will just like recognize anything that you have. Even like foreign packages. I had something on like Royal Mail yesterday, and like I had copied the URL just to track something like absent-mindedly, and the next time I like launched Deliveries, it said, "Oh, this is on your clipboard." So like and I have yet to find a delivery service that it doesn't work with.
Even foreign Canadian delivery services, Allie. Yeah, no, it is aces, as the kids say. All right, games. Peter, Civilization Beyond Earth, game of the year.
Indeed. Sid Meier, of course, has always been associated with the Civilization games, and he stepped away from them a few years ago to do Sid Meier's Alpha Centauri, which was a similar civilization building game, but taking it to the next level, where Civilization really kind of focused on developing earthbound cultures from like a Stone Age culture all the way up to the modern day and maybe a little bit into the future. Alpha Centauri said, okay, well, let's leave Earth. Civilization Beyond Earth is a proper Civ game that takes it to the next level where we start colonizing other planets. And it's very, very cool. It is a turn-based strategy game, just like all Civilization games are. And it's lush, it's beautiful, it's wonderfully animated. There are really gorgeous interstitial cinematic sequences that really pull you into the story. But beyond that, it is incredibly, incredibly deep. So you are in charge of uplifting the civilization from landing on the strange alien world with very limited resources, having to make use of whatever native resources they can find, and often quell or manage somehow hostile native fauna, to developing relationships with other colonies that are popping up on the same planet. So all of the elements of a classic Civilization game are there, but it's been thoroughly updated for 2014. Aspire did the port for this, and they did an excellent job. You can buy it on directly from them, I think. You can also get it from Steam, and I believe you can now get it from the Mac App Store as well.
Yeah, if Christopher Nolan and James Cameron had a beautiful game love child, it would be Civilization After Earth.
Yes.
Beyond Earth, sorry.
Beyond Earth.
Action game of the year, Tomb Raider. This, to me, revitalized the Tomb Raider franchise. It become almost like a stereotype, almost like it's like, I don't know, a cartoon. And this was actually a really good action game.
Yeah, I grew up with Tomb Raider. I mean, I feel like most of us in my generation really did. It's sort of like the game you could play on the Mac, and there weren't very many of them. And the new Tomb Raider, I actually was first introduced to it because a friend was playing it on their Xbox, and I was kind of watching along. And I actually went and got it for myself on the Mac. And like, I usually don't like 3D shooters, and I get really stressed out about it. But I really, really enjoyed this game, even with the ridiculously dramatic, gratuitous death scenes, which are pretty hilarious.
And a friend of the show, Guy English, will recommend you play it on a new Mac Pro so that you can have Arkham Asylum on one of the graphics cards and Tomb Raider on the other graphics card, so for high availability.
He's a crazy multitasker, that one.
All right, family game of the year, Lego Marvel Superheroes. There are few things in life that give me more pleasure than superheroes and Lego, and I was a huge fan of Lego Batman, the original one. I thought the later ones kind of got far afield, but it was great seeing the Marvel superheroes show up for some Lego fun finally.
Absolutely. Farrell, which also ported Tomb Raider, ported this to the Mac as well, and they've kind of got a lock on the Lego franchise on the Mac. So if you want a Lego game for your Mac, Farrell is where to find them. Lego Marvel Superheroes lets you play as just a wealth of different superheroes from the Marvel Comics universe. You can play as the Avengers, you can play X-Men, you can play Spider-Man, you can play so many different ones, and each of them has different abilities, and it's sort of an open-ended Lego world to explore and to do little missions in. It's sort of like Lego meets Grand Theft Auto in that respect, but without the hooker killing.
So here I'll just reenact my favorite scene. Yes, Lego Hulk will smash for you. There we go. There we go. I'll keep these around. I don't have any Lego Harry Potter, Ali, sadly, but I do have Lego Marvel.
That's all right. I have a Dobby on my keychain.
I miss the retroactive Yoda. Mac puzzle game of the year, Broken Age. This was really interesting. This was really innovative. You have I can't tell if it's two personalities split in one each given form, or if it's two separate characters. I mean, like in the deep down psychological aspects of the game, but it is one game from two very unique points of view.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. It's more than anything, it's a point and click adventure game from one of the masters of this particular genre, Tim Schafer, who used to work at LucasArts and made games like Grim Fandango back in the day. And it is a beautifully done game with voice acting from Elijah Wood. So, if you like the Lord of the Rings movies or any of the other stuff that he's done, you'll appreciate his voice talents. And it's got a really kind of interesting backstory, too, because Broken Age's development was spurred by a Kickstarter campaign where they were trying to raise, I think, like $500,000 or $400,000 or something like that, and ended up producing a ridiculous amount more. I think 3.5 million got pitched in by people who were really anxious to see Tim Schafer do this point-and-click adventure game. As you said, Rene, it is told from the perspective of two different characters, and I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole and explain what exactly the story is about, but the bottom line is you direct characters to move around on the screen, examine objects, you have to solve puzzles along the way, and that's why we gave it the Puzzle Game Award. It's really an adventure game, but puzzles are so integrated and important to it that it really is a puzzle game too.
One of the problems we're having is that these games are transcending what you would call literal, like traditional categories.
Categories are hard. Categories are very hard. And on top of that, I will say that I haven't finished Broken Age yet, but it keeps on niggling in the back of my mind. It reminds me in a weird way, not quite of Braid, which was a game from a few years back that stuck with me to this day. But it has kind of that sort of quirky, slightly off, not quite a fairy tale, not quite a dastardly plot kind of atmosphere to it.
It's half fairy, half fiend tale.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so that's the software for the Mac. We have all the iOS stuff that we went over last show. We have a ton of accessories, favorite styluses, favorite Thunderbolt storage devices, everything that's sort of novel, new, and interesting that we could find for 2014. I'll have the link in the show notes, and you can check back last episode for the iPhone and iPad stuff. But I think 2014 was a pretty awesome year. It was in retrospect, because the stuff came out across the year, I didn't notice it, but in sum total, it was a great year for new features, new devices, and new software.
Yeah, I tend to agree. It's really, we can say what we will about 2014 outside of the technology sphere, and certainly in technology there are some hits and misses. But specifically when we talk about apps and we talk about accessories, there have been some really fantastic moves forward. We've seen, the fitness bands and the fitness wearables market has actually exploded and become a legitimate thing, and not just 5,000 tech nerds in San Francisco are wearing this and no one else is. We've seen a huge outpouring of both iOS and Mac apps. Some of the stuff that's shown up on iOS this year, especially with the release of iOS 8, is fantastic. Continuity and Yosemite is allowing more and more apps to transcend a single platform, which is really cool. I don't know. It leaves me really, really excited for what we're going to see next year.
Nominations for 2015 open in 2 weeks, folks. Start planning.
Lynda.com. I'm just singing everything today.
No, I love it, because we're taking a quick break to tell you about Lynda.com. They are an easy, affordable way to help individuals and organizations learn to instantly stream thousands of courses created by experts on software, web development, graphic design, and more. And if you wanted to, Ren, you could go to Lynda.com if you didn't know how, and they would help you take that jingle and turn it into a iPad recording that you could leave on the Christmas table for one of your relatives.
What? That's awesome.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely great. It's the closest thing I've ever come to having this portable Matrix thing where I can just pick up a communicator and say, give me kung fu or give me helicopter flying skills. It doesn't go through a jack into my actual neck yet, but it does go through my eyeballs and into my brain and through my ears and into my brain. And Peter, you've used Lynda before. It's just a fantastic service to learn things from.
It absolutely is. There's such a depth and breadth of different things that you can learn too. It's really kind of crazy.
So famously, I've been trying to use it to figure out how to use Logic for the podcast editing. And I opened up Logic, and there was no share button. I mean, Final Cut has a share button. GarageBand has a share button. I didn't know how to get stuff out. So someone, friend of the show, Dave Wiska, said, look for Bounce, buddy. And I looked, but I was too humiliated to follow up. So I just went to lynda.com, and I looked, and it showed me how all of that stuff worked, and I got actual audio out of the application. And now I'm Allie, if there's anything you want to learn this holiday season, including how to, bake gingerbread houses, you could will not go to lynda.com to learn that, but learn all the technology you can use to record that, package it, and make a wonderful manual to distribute for it.
I can't wait until lynda.com just makes gingerbread houses for me.
That is the next level, but right now for $25 a month you get unlimited access to over 100,000 video tutorials. There are new ones being added every day, and they are made by industry experts. The people that you see all the time, wish you had the skills of, they are sharing those skills with you. You can also upgrade to premium, where you get things like downloadable versions, project files, so you can follow along. You can do a little bit or as much as you want. They're broken down into very useful bite-sized segments, and you can also do it on your iPhone, on your iPad, on your Android device. There's great things there. There's developer topics, there's 3D animation, there's audio, music, there's design, there's photography. If you want to take up your picture skills for the holidays because you want to make sure that the photos turn out absolutely great, they can absolutely help you with that. We've also got a special offer from them. If you want to, if you're not sure, if you're not convinced, if our words alone have not compelled you, you can go to lynda.com/iMore and try lynda.com for free for 7 days. Just see if you like it. If you do like it, sign up. You will learn everything, all of that and more. That's lynda.com/iMore. Thank you so much, Lynda. All right, so switching gears, we're doing a lot of stuff this week. One of the other things we're doing is our first retrospective on iOS 8. It's been 3 months. We've had it for 90 days. Ali, let's start with you. How do you feel about iOS 8 3 months later? Are there things that you initially liked that now you don't like, or things you didn't like that you've grown to depend on?
I think that iOS 8 has been one of the biggest leaps forward, but one of the most frustrating leaps forward in terms of bugs and just general troubleshooting. I think that I can't live without widgets, which sounds really odd because we went so long without them.
But I agree.
That's like the only thing I really find myself like heavily depending on a daily basis from iOS 8. Outside of like SMS relay, because I have not had green bubble friends in like 3 years, and now we can be friends again. But I think I will grow to depend more on handoff and continuity. Like Peter, I use continuity calling, but there's never really a time that my phone's not just like sitting on my desk. So I think out of muscle memory, I still just pick it up. But I did not know about keypad until Peter just told me that. So maybe my dependency on continuity calling will get a little stronger, because I had found that it's easy to pick up calls on the Mac, but it's kind of awkward to make calls from the Mac the way that Yosemite's set up. So that seems like that kind of eases that pain point, which I think is probably what made me stray away from. I would rather just pick up my phone and call someone or use Siri, because it just going through the FaceTime icon or however you have to do it on the Mac is just not very intuitive. Yeah, for me, I think the biggest thing is probably widgets.
What about you, Peter?
Well, as far as continuity is concerned specifically?
No, just iOS 8 in general. Anything that surprises you through or has changed about your opinion over the last 3 months?
Well, I was really excited at the outset to give keyboards a try, and I found it to be a complete failure. Keyboards are one area where I just don't really get it, and I don't know if I'm not using it right or if I'm just not the right person for it.
They're not implemented right yet, maybe?
Yeah.
You're holding it wrong.
Yeah,
I honestly feel like with keyboards, the switching process is so cumbersome and very frustrating. Like it's really nice if you're in the default keyboard or the emoji keyboard, you can tap and hold and you see all of them in a list. But the second you switch to a third-party keyboard, you have to cycle through every keyboard. And I have like 6 or 7 going at a time to test them, and that's just too many keyboards.
Yeah,
that's exactly
not
right.
Very
that's
good
exactly my problem.
Yeah.
QuickType, though, is something that I use almost constantly. You know, the autocorrection or the way that QuickType works compared to autocorrection, I guess I should say, is so much better and often saves me a lot of keystrokes. You know, it can figure out what I'm talking about in relatively little time, and I just tap that.
I forget to tap it. Like it works, but I just forget to tap it.
It's a lot better with punctuation. QuickType is.
Yeah, I really appreciate that.
Hell is a word. We are, as a contraction, is now a word. So, I mean, and even if those things don't if it's not the first thing it suggests, it's always in the quick type bar, where before it was like autocorrect, okay, yes, WE''RE is a valid word, I can use that. Now I have the option to just tap that instead of having to remember to dismiss autocorrect or it was going to change it. So QuickType, I with Peter, I use it a lot, but I don't find myself noticing that I'm using it. And I think that's kind of the point. It's more efficient. You don't need it in that way.
It's just there. Yeah, when I remember that it's there, I use it a lot. Especially if I'm doing one-handed things, which on the iPhone 6 I still am trying to do, despite the fact that it's not super practical. So trying to type messages one-handed, I use QuickType a whole lot. When I'm typing furiously, just trying to get something out, I will almost dismiss it entirely out of hand.
So what about you, Ren? Anything that surprised you in a good or bad way since you started using it?
Since I started using iOS 8 in general?
Yeah, has your opinion changed now some 3 months later about anything?
Yeah, I mean, I will say I was super, super, super psyched about extensions. And so far, I've only just started to get to use them. I think photo extensions are one of the key points that I love about iOS 8. Yeah, they are the bomb. I was trying to avoid saying that, but yeah.
I forgot that. Yeah, I forgot about that completely. Yeah, that might trump widgets for me, actually. Now that you said that, I use it more.
Yeah, photo extensions and widgets are pretty high up there for me. And then regular extensions, again, I hadn't been using them a whole lot other than the transmit extension to upload things. But with workflow, I'm finding that I'm using extensions a lot more now because I have my various little workflows that can be executed. Especially, I have a quick look workflow that can quick look things that normally you would have to open in another app to look at. Like Safari doesn't have quick look built in. So with a quick look extension, I can preview things that Safari won't normally load. And that's really cool. So some of these things I think still need a little bit of time, but for a start, for 3 months in, I'm very pleased.
I think extensions are totally something right now that usability depends on what apps people use. Because photos, I probably would not be using photos extensions if my most used filter and editing apps didn't already support it. So I think they're heavily dependent on who's implementing them and who's using them. I've had some people say, oh, they're useless. I haven't found any apps that, use them well. But it's probably an app difference there as to what we use on a regular basis.
Yeah, and it's still early days in that there aren't a lot of apps. And also, I talked about this a little bit in our 3 months later article. There's the question of Apple pulling apps, and Apple, it's most of the big ones that have been pulled have been reinstated, which is promising. But there is that sort of uncertain, on a shaky ground where developers are like, do I really want to put 6 months into making this feature a thing, and then have Apple say, nope, sorry, you're not allowed to do that. So hopefully, Apple and developers come to an understanding where, they don't have to fear for their livelihoods to invent things. But I do think that they're making a lot of great strides.
So for me, I agree with you guys completely. iOS 8 is a huge leap forward, but it's something that you stub your toes on several times along the way. And it's just because of either rejections or bugs or difficulties to install things or to use things. A lot of the stuff I'm enthusiastic about. I think it sets up, continuity and extensibility are incredible foundations that are going to, help make the system better for years to come. I think iOS 8.1.1 and now 8.1.2 are massive improvements for stability and bug fixes. I would hardly recommend it to anybody now. There's some other marquee features I want to talk about, though. And one of them is Apple Pay, because I'm just looking on longingly at all of you Americans and your tap to Apple Pay things. And how has Apple Pay been working for you, Ali?
Well, there's all of 3 places in Long Island, Michiana, Kentucky that take Apple Pay.
Does it work well when you do use them, though?
Yeah, I've never had any issues with Apple Pay when I've been able to use them. Works good.
And in-app?
I've only done that with the Apple Store app, and again, no issue. It's worked flawlessly for me.
What about you, Peter?
I want to love Apple Pay, but it just isn't ubiquitous enough for me to love yet. Having said that, when I have used it, it's so incredibly convenient. It's done exactly the way that I want it to work. I just want it to work in more places that I actually shop at.
So another thing that I'm curious about is, hey, I'm not going to do it. Yo there, Siri. I don't want to make any more angry. Last time Peter did it, we just had complaints for a month. When you have the iPhone plugged in and you say those magic words and Siri responds, I think it's nice. I have used it when I'm driving. I have used it when I'm cooking. I think it would be great if Apple allowed us to choose from different words, especially like if Ali and Heather both have them plugged in and you yell out, "Oh, yo, Siri," they'll both just chime in. There's no way, because Siri doesn't do any voice distinction. There's no way to have multiple, to use it for multiple devices. And I think it'd be great if you could set custom codes. But if you guys played around with, I don't know, Tra-la-la-la Siri?
I've used it a few times. Not very often, though, and I think it's because I forget it's there.
I use it constantly when I'm in the car, and I'll even use it when I'm around the office if I've got my phone plugged in and charging. A lot of times I'll use it to set alarms for myself or to change music tracks if I'm listening to music. In the car, I've used it to get directions. I've used it to call people, and it works. It's reliable and very cool and a really great feature and fun to play with too. I just get a kick out of having conversations with my phone sometimes.
So that brings me to where I become the old grumpy man of the podcast and ask about messages, because I love a lot of the new messages feature. I love the details sheet. I love that you can name group messages and that you can do not disturb them or leave them. But the thing that irks me is just, and I know the kids love this, the kids with their stickers love this. When Facebook first rolled out stickers and I touched one and it instantly sent, it filled me with dread. And now I have that dread with messages because like it says, share your location. I tap my location and it just sends. Maybe I was just playing around with it. I would like the ability to say, yes, please send it, like to stage it. I tap a picture and it sends. I accidentally selfie people now, and it's usually like half of my head. It's or you're recording voice and you don't know it. I think I understand why the messaging culture, people use the lines and the WeChats and things like that, like the rapidity of it, but it scares me. I think we should have the option of saying, please let me confirm anything that gets sent out from my messages client.
I mean, it could be as little as a toggle, confirm to send.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I like the idea of gesture-based messaging, and Apple in the past has been very, very good with how it implements its gestures. But unfortunately, when we're talking about messaging and we're talking about gestures that can be performed in a pocket, I remember some early betas of iOS 8 where the voice memos could get accidentally toggled if you left your phone down with the screen still on, due to God knows what sensor. But I ended up accidentally sending an 11-minute conversation about a person to that person, and it wasn't like particularly incriminating or anything. It was just more talking about like a thing that had happened. But it was still one of those things where I had to immediately send to that person. I'm like, please just trust me and delete this. Like there's nothing really bad, but just delete this.
I remember when Google Glass first came out, a prominent technology blogger had it in her purse and was walking around, and I was getting it sent to me. Her conversation was being DM'd to me over and over again. That kind of technology is dangerous.
It's very dangerous,
Yeah, and I think Rene sent me a couple audio recordings on accident. It was like 2-minute clips. Like all you could hear was like rustling because you could tell like he put his phone in his pocket or something. I'm like, what is that?
Don't make fun of how I talk, Allie. Yeah, so I would like to have that fixed.
The one thing I will say about messages is I do like the details screen. Yeah. I think having easy access to attachments is really rad, and I do like the fact that location features have been moved and toggled to messages from Find My Friends, because when they were in Find My Friends, it was really difficult to get non-technology people to download it. When I was like talking to friends of mine and we were at a derby thing, and I'm like, okay, so you've got to download this app, and then you've got to turn on these random toggles for limited sharing, and then we're going to do this, and you'll have to accept it on your screen. Now it's just one button. It's share, and then it's like, do you want to share for 1 hour, 6 hours, the day, or indefinitely? And like that, it's a much easier explanation. Being like, hey, we're going out to lunch. I'm going to send you my location. Hey, I'm driving to your house. Here's how you can track my location so that you know like where I am on the road.
Yeah, I think all of that is just way way brilliant. I'm really happy with all of that. So sort of final thoughts. We'll start with you, Ren, because we started with Ali last time. iOS 8, has it come far enough? Does it still have a long way to go? How are you feeling about it right now?
For iOS 8, I do think it's come a decent amount. I'm very happy that the bug fixes have been implemented to fix some of the rough edges. There's still a little bit here and there. Spotlight still doesn't work for me, which is kind of a bummer. Or it works, but it works kind of off and on. And that really, I use Spotlight almost exclusively to launch my apps that aren't front page apps. So I'd really like to see a little bit of improvement there. And there are bits and pieces, but I'm really excited overall with what I've seen coming from Apple and coming from iOS 8 and coming from developers who are building apps for iOS 8. I just want more apps. That's my constant refrain. I want more iOS 8 ready extensions ready apps. And considering that brand new apps have to be built with the iOS 8 SDK as of February, and updates have to be built with the iOS 8 SDK as of June, hopefully I'll get my wish, and hopefully we'll see more people, committing and helping these new features.
What about you, Peter? I mean, I know you like the family sharing. I think we both think HealthKit and HomeKit are maybe taking too long to arrive, but in general, how are you seeing it?
Well, I think that iOS 7 was the major UI improvement to iOS, and iOS 8 is the major under-the-hood improvement that we were waiting for from last year. So in that respect, it's a bookend. And although everything wasn't there on day one and still isn't there today, I have no compunction whatsoever about recommending it to people. The only exception that I would give to that still are the lingering edge cases, the people who are using devices that are on the low end of what's supported. Some of those still aren't working great. We'll see with 8.2 where we are. But if you've got a reasonably recent iPhone or iPad or iPod Touch, even a fifth generation iPod Touch, I think that iOS 8 is certainly worth the upgrade, because you do get a wealth of new features. Especially if you use it with a Mac, you get all the continuity stuff that's really wonderful, and definitely a worthwhile upgrade.
Awesome. Ali, you get the last word today. Well, for iOS 8 at least.
Yeah, I don't really see any reason except what Peter mentioned. If you're on an edge case, and I mean, it's typically the same thing every year. If you have a lower end device, it's typically you're not going to get the performance and all of the feature set out of the latest and greatest. So I would like to see more apps support handoff. I would like to see a lot of those basically pro apps that could do cool things with handoff. I think SMS relay widgets, photo extensions, all kinds of extensions, sharing extensions, they're all under the hood things that just make iOS better and more accessible. I'm just really excited to see what developers do with them, because right now there's a limited amount of apps that are taking advantage of that. So it'll be interesting to see what it brings to the table and what iOS 9 brings to the table after that.
So I'm going to be a little bit contrarian. I have an iPhone 4S here and an iPad 2 or 3, I forget which one it is. I have to pick it up and see how heavy it is, running iOS 8.1.2. And I can't say I see much difference from iOS 7. So there's some people maybe who'll say the performance is worse. I think they're sort of on par. But to go back to Ren's point, the binaries that you're going to be able to run on those are going to be iOS 8 only soon. And if you want apps that only support iOS 8 features, it'll behoove you to upgrade. So I think you won't be much better off when it comes to performance. So you may be even a little bit worse off, but I think the ability to run iOS 8 apps will make up for it. And you're probably at the edge of upgrading anyway, so I don't think it's a horrible hit to take. All right, so that is iOS 8, and we have this full bobble-headed roundtable review up on the site. You can check it out. Right now it's stickied, but it'll be in the show notes as well. The last thing we wanted to talk about is going up tomorrow. So if you're listening to the show now, or you're listening to it tonight or something, you're getting a sneak preview. And that is the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus are also 3 months old. And that's 25 in phone years. I mean, I don't know the exact conversion ratio, but it's well on its way to maturity. So I want to talk to you guys a little bit about that. I guess, first of all, Ali, let's start off with the design and resiliency. Has your iPhone, is it scratched? Is it dented? Is it holding up well for you? Is it bent?
No. I have my 6 Plus right here, and I put an Apple case on it. But I have not. I noticed I got a little tiny little hairline scratch in the front of my 6 Plus down by the home button. Like you can really only see it under certain lights, and it doesn't bother me. But I still prefer white glass over black glass for that reason, because you don't see scratches when they happen. As far as the aluminum goes, I have not one scratch on either of my phones. Then again, I'm careful with my phones. I don't typically have them in cases, but yeah, I don't. They're a thinner phone. I don't have. I don't know. I'm not a fan of the whole. I don't buy into the whole bend gate. So
My phone has been in my pocket every day for the last 90 days, and it is as straight as the day it rolled out of the factory.
yeah, my biggest concern when I purchased a 6 and a 6 Plus was the camera. And I know it's sapphire, but I still had my doubts that maybe would scratch just from being, coming into contact with the table. And yeah, I haven't found that to be the case. So
Mine is scratching other things. Like it's not getting scratched, but it has scratched other things.
yeah, sapphire cut your glass table or something.
I could use it to get in through a window. I just draw a big circle on it, and
Yeah, but yeah, I'm overall happy with the build quality. The first iPhone 6, the one I purchased on launch day actually did my power button failed. It just eventually got to the point where I couldn't push it anymore. So it'll be interesting to see if the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus have the same button issues that previous iPhones have. Power button has been a common issue with many generations of iPhones, so I don't know if that's Yeah, mine on my Plus does too, but it's one of those things that it's one of the more common failures if they're going to happen. So it'll be interesting to see if that was a fluke or if it's something that people start reporting more and more of. Other than that, I'm happy with it hardware-wise.
I'm going to save Peter for last. We can argue about phone sizes and go to Ren. How's the design doing for you? The new Ren. I know some people think it's slipperier. I love it. It feels like a Riverstone. I just can't stop, just rolling it in my hands all day.
I really don't like the slipperiness. I like the feeling of it when I'm not trying to grip it one-handed. When I'm trying to hold it one-handed, especially if I'm laying in bed while trying to read, the amount of times that I have it fall on my face are far too many for my taste. So I put on a couple of cases. I had an Apple leather case for a while, and I really like that. And then I was testing a Casetify case, and I still have it on in part because stars, oh my God, it's full of stars. And the fact that I like that you can see the gold through the case, which is like, again, if you're gonna have a gold iPhone, you might as well have something to show it off. And the Casetify case is not, it's not 100% slip removal. Like I still have some slipperiness to it, but it's much better than having the phone raw. And I did break my phone 1 month into owning it because I am a terrible person, and I have since gotten it fixed. I do find, like Allie was saying, the screen, in my opinion, scratches a little more than previous screens. This one, I've been very, very careful now that I got my screen replaced to avoid putting it next to my keys. But I actually had a lot of key scratches before that phone broke. And that was kind of a bummer. Not that it's really visible when the screen's on, but when the screen's off and you have it like sitting in the light, you can see all of these tiny little hairline scratches all over the display, and it's a little sad.
Well, I think that's something to think about when you buy it too. Having both a black and a white phone. I mean, when the screen's on, you can't see it. So, but if you're OCD about stuff like that, I've noticed that the black, especially the trim around by the home button and the speaker, that black is much more obvious when it comes to scratching. So the white glass, as long as the top of the bottom doesn't seem to, you can't tell if it gets scratched in those areas.
Yeah, I agree. The iPhone 6 camera actually scratched my iPhone 6 Plus screen, but that was me putting them both back to back in my pocket. All right, so Peter, you still incorrectly believe that the iPhone 6 Plus is too big for human beings?
No, I believe correctly that the iPhone 6 Plus is too big for me. And as we've established many times, I am not a human. No, just kidding. I've used them both, and I still really can't cotton to the size of the iPhone 6 Plus because I do so much of what I do on my on my phone with one hand that I'm just very accustomed to pulling it out of my pants pocket and sliding it to unlock it, and doing whatever it is I'm going to do, whether it's messaging or answer a call or play a game for a few minutes or whatever. And I can't do that as easily with the iPhone 6 Plus as I can with the 6. So the iPhone 6 is the better form factor for me. Everybody's mileage will vary. Simon Sage, of course, who is a giant among humans and has a hand that spans several yards in width, has no problem whatsoever gripping the iPhone 6 Plus. So he thinks I'm wrong too, Rene. But I've got no problem with anybody who likes the iPhone 6 Plus.
You were this legendary kaiju, and now look at you.
I know.
6 in Greenland.
Shrinking little T-Rex claws or something. I don't know, but it is what it is.
I get it. I agree with you. I mean, I love the split view controller. I love that giant screen.
I love the battery life. God, I love.
That's what I was gonna say. I just don't charge my phone very much anymore. It just lasts forever. I mean, the A8 is a performance is fantastic. I don't think I've gotten anywhere near to taxing that chipset, but it's the battery life that really keeps me on the 6 Plus.
Yeah, it's 2 p.m. here, and I have 78% battery life, and I think I pulled it off the charger at 6:30 this morning.
I'm at 92. It's ridiculous. It's just nuts.
I'm very envious.
All right, so moving on from that, the cameras, Ren, the beautiful, beautiful cameras.
The beautiful, beautiful cameras continue to be beautiful. And though I am taking more photos with my DSLR for iMore, I still find myself pulling this guy out when I'm just on the road and don't want to take a portable, a DSLR. I took this to Disneyland or Disney World. I took this on vacation. I really like the photos that the iPhone 6 is coming out with, especially when you pair it up with photo extensions and everything else. Video is a whole nother ball game, and like a really impressive one. Every year the iPhone's camera gets better at video, and the low light improvements on this phone are amazing, or absolutely stellar, both on photo and video, but especially video, and especially for shooting slow motion. You pair the iPhone 6 with something like hyperlapse, and you get almost cinema quality video. It's really impressive.
We saw that today. They had Winter Wonders in New York City, where an artist took the iPhone 6 Plus to Rockefeller Center, to Soho, and to Fifth Avenue, and just did slow motion black and white. And man, was that pretty! So pretty. Are you still enjoying them, Ali, even though you're surrounded by Android phones?
I am. I'm still toggling between the 6 and the 6 Plus, but I find myself leaning more towards the 6 Plus, and I think it's due to battery life. But as far as camera quality goes, I find the 6 pretty able to keep up toe-to-toe with the 6 Plus. The only difference in what I found when I compared them was the 6 Plus does a little bit better in low light, but not in the way that people think. Like, it's not just better picture quality. When you have them side by side and you magnify them, you can see that the 6 Plus takes advantage of the optical image stabilization. It can leave the shutter open for longer. It can let in more light. The 6 seems to just bump the ISO up, which results in a little bit more grain. But honestly, unless you have the photos side by side, I don't really consider it to be a purchase factor. I didn't notice the difference enough. I literally had to put the photos side by side in Photoshop and blow them up to be able to see the grain difference between the two. So they handle images a little bit different because of the hardware, but overall they both produce the best pictures an iPhone's ever produced. So no matter which one you go with, you're going to get amazing, stellar pictures that you'll be happy with the way they come just straight from the camera.
Yeah, the ability to pull from your pocket, take a quick photo, and that photo turning out usable, I think, is Apple's huge advantage. I think the image signal processor in the A8 is the best they've ever done, and that's saying something. It's super photo time. Yeah,
it does. Panoramas, I think the first phone I really noticed that with, I think, was the 5S when I compared it to the 5. ISP got so much better. I took one at the beach, and I mean, you just had a huge contrast from, a glaring sun and then water that was shimmering and then darker areas where the sand because it was night, and it just the way that it handled that compared to other devices, it balanced everything so well. I know most of it's software, and I think that's where Apple really excels.
Absolutely agreed. So the display, we forgot to talk about the display. Apple did a lot of subtle things. There's a new polarizer, so if you wear polarized sunglasses, the transmit interference is much lower. It's got dual domain pixels. Because these screens are bigger now, you can share them. You can sit with people next to you playing games, looking at social networks, watching videos, and they get a better angle of view. It's got photographically aligned pixels, so the blacks are blacker and the brights are brighter. It's sRGB accurate. These are a lot of technical terms, but I just noticed that it looks terrific. It looks terrific when I'm looking at it. I'm looking at it from the side when I'm watching movies. It doesn't let you go through and cycle between modes like a TV set or a Samsung phone does. It just does all that automatically for you. And I've been super impressed. I've stopped traveling with an iPad. I've only been traveling with my iPhone, and I've been sitting on 6-hour flights and watching TV shows and movies and doing all sorts of work and stuff with it. And it's just fabulous. Apple calls it Retina HD because the 6 is 720p and the 6 Plus is 1080. But regardless of the pixel density, it just looks terrific to me. I have no complaints.
One of the things that I've noticed. Sorry, go on.
The first time when I turned my 6 Plus on, when I pulled it out of the box, it looked like a picture on the phone. Like it didn't like it almost looked like you had to peel a sticker off or something, because it was just it's amazing. I didn't notice it as much on the 6 as the 6 Plus.
One thing that I noticed, one thing that I really appreciate is that they've changed the way that they manage the polarization on the screen, because I work with polarized sunglasses all the time. And when I'm out, it's always been tricky depending on which angle I'm holding my iPhone at that I'll get a black screen. I don't notice that nearly as much now with the iPhone 6 as I did with the iPhone 5S.
Yeah, and it's thinner too. So before, like when they went to the in-cell display, it was almost like the pixels were inside the glass, like an old animation cell. And now the glass is so thin, it looks like they're shooting up through it, trying to break out. And it's interesting to see where that's going to go.
Exploding in your face.
All right, so let's go around the room and get some final thoughts now. Ali, anything that you thought you'd like and don't like as much? Anything that you thought wouldn't matter to you and turned out mattering a bit? Any changes in your view on the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus now, 3 months later?
I think initially I was afraid that I would not be able to use in one-handed, and the 6 Plus, that still holds true. It's silly. You really can't use it one-handed very efficiently. But I find myself able to use the 6 pretty easily one-handed, and that's the phone that I've up until this point been using as a regular device. Whenever I pick up my 5S now, it feels so small, and I was really skeptical for the first month or so that I would think 4.7 inches was too large, just because I like the portability of the iPhone. And I remember when I unboxed my S5 back in May, I pulled it out of the box and I was like, holy crap, this phone is small. It's not small to me anymore. So I don't really think there's anything that I didn't like that I found myself liking. One thing I didn't expect is how much I would like the curved glass aspect on the new phones. I didn't really think that would be that much of an impact, but now when I pick up like a 5S or a 5C, just the design, I much prefer to the design, and I know it adds a little bit of the slipperiness, but I also think for gestures, it's one of my favorite features by far.
Nice. Peter, we forgot to talk about radio, so I don't know if you have anything you want to share on Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, or LTE, but in general, what's your perception now 3 months later?
3 months later, it's absolutely the best iPhone that I've ever used. Is it perfect? No, nothing is. But the iPhone 6 and the iPhone 6 Plus are both very, very well-engineered pieces of hardware from Apple. And I love them both, but I find the iPhone 6 is a better fit for me. What I would really like is an iPhone 6 Plus shrunk down to the size of an iPhone 6. So an iPhone 6 Plus with that battery life and the even higher res screen, just a little bit smaller and a little bit easier to manage for me. But absolutely the best iPhone I've ever used.
Nice. What about you, Ren?
Yeah, I was, again, like Ali, I was skeptical about the 4.7 inches, and 2 days after I got it, I didn't look back. I do miss being able to easily one-handedly do everything, especially if I'm lying down. But I've gotten used to almost everything else. I love the feel of the curved glass. I love the cameras. In general, just Touch ID is wicked fast. Siri is wicked fast. I am very, very impressed with the iPhone 6. I wish it wouldn't scratch so easily on the front. And I wish it had the battery life of the 6 Plus, but I would even make it a little bit thicker to have the battery life of the 6 Plus. But I know that's not necessarily a popular opinion. But if you're holding out on getting a larger phone because you really like the 4-inch screen size, I would go into an Apple store and actually spend some time with the iPhone 6 because I really don't think it takes that much getting used to.
No, not at all. And even, I mean, what do you have? At least 14 days to return them to if you.
Mm-hmm.
I would say if you use those, I would challenge anyone to use one for 3 to 5 days, and you probably won't notice a difference.
I was talking about that with, on the Don Melton podcast that we did. He finally got his iPhone 6 Plus and he did his review of it. And we were talking about how you pick up an iPhone 5 now or more, you pick up an iPhone 4 and your window into apps and the internet just feels so shrunken down, feels so small, so constrained, so compact, so claustrophobic even. And it's amazing how it opens up everything without being iPad mini or iPad size. It's still that little bit of change in size because it's so small makes such a big difference. And I echo a lot of what you guys said. To me, I'm going to make a concerted effort to spend a week with the iPhone 6 just so that I can yell at Peter fairly instead of unfairly next time. But the iPhone 6 Plus, just having that big screen, basically for me, it's a tiny tablet as much as it is a big phone. And I've gotten not only used to it, but really to appreciate it, especially with all the traveling. I think, Ren can speak to this too, but I've been traveling every 2 weeks for the last 3 months, and having everything on one device is so useful.
It's essential. It really is.
Yeah, all right. So that is our review of the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus 3 months later. That is also our show. I want to thank you for joining us. Our holiday schedule is going to be a bit chaotic because the show is usually done on Thursdays, but Christmas and New Year falls on Thursdays, and then we're going to be at CES. And so the only thing I can recommend is to subscribe to us on YouTube or Google Plus, and that way whenever the show does go live, you'll be able to see it and you'll be notified about it and you won't miss it. But otherwise, the show is available at youtube.com/iMore video every time as soon as we've got it finished. We did screw up the video. I screwed up the video last week, so it was an audio-only show. I apologize for that, but we have video back this week. And if you do prefer the audio, you can find that all the time on iTunes and via RSS. I want to thank you very much for listening. If you haven't lately, please consider going to iTunes and leaving a review or leaving a rating because it helps other people find us. It encourages Apple to feature us, and it just makes the universe a much better place. Allie, if people are interested in finding out about you and following your holiday non-fruit cookie making festivities, where can they go?
Every day on iMore.com, and I am at iMuggle on all of the things.
Peter, what about you?
On iMore, of course, and on the social things at Flarg, Flargh.
Awesome. Ren?
iMore.com and at Saturn on Twitter and Instagram and other various things.
That was the best 50s jingle for the site we've ever heard.
I do them on occasion.
Awesome. You can find me at Rene Ritchie. You can find all of our shows at imore.com/podcast. Thanks, everyone, and have a wonderful day /week/month.